Hey, what's going on? Barnaby here, along with Mike Johnson, a man who has spent much of his life in the construction industry. So with all your fingers.
I've got all of them. These two are implants, but that's okay.
Yeah. So anyway, what we're talking about here will be the difference between chop saws and miter saws, because Mike, in my neighborhood, it is all about when somebody wants to borrow a tool. Hey, you got that chop saw?
Oh yeah.
It's like, no, that's a miter saw.
Yeah.
So set the record
There's
straight.
a difference between the two. A chop saw. This is a masonry chop saw, but it'll illustrate the point. A chop saw is only going to cut in one direction, just up and down. You're chopping. It doesn't have the ability to spin the blade through the degrees that make it a miter saw. So, in fact, it's kind of hard to find one of these in a woodworking application, because more and more the woodworking world is all going to miter boxes or miter saws.
Right, and you know, it's so complex when you go into the stores or you go online looking for these things and try to figure out which one's right for you, because so many terms. I mean, this one is a pretty straightforward. It is a 10-inch compound miter saw.
There you go.
Simple enough, right?
Yep. So you've got your miter ability, so the ability to spin that blade. And you can hear it clicking in the detents there. Those are pre-selected, commonly used angles in finished carpentry. And when you spin it this way, you're mitering. If you're talking about a compound saw or a beveling saw, you've got to talk about first the ability to bevel. Beveling is cutting like that. So if you take the saw and you spin it to a miter, and then you bevel it as well, you're now making a compound cut.
That is a 10-inch blade, right?
A 10-inch blade.
Pretty
yes.
popular size.
A popular size. There's debate. I mean, there's 10-inch blade, there's 12-inch blade, there's 7¼ inch blade. There's all sorts of different blades, and sometimes there's a little debate on which one's the best one. You know, you see a guy with a 12-inch blade, and you kind of rib him. You know, that blade deflects more than a 10-inch blade. Well, I guess technically, yes, it does. I mean, that's a debate to solve later. But there are all sorts of different blade diameters.
Right, and this would be the 7¼ right here,
Yeah.
which is just like everybody's circular saw.
Exactly.
Is that probably the way that they designed that, just to say there's interchangeability?
I think so. I think it cuts down on a couple of things. It cuts down on your blade cost. They've been popping those blades out for circular saws for years and years and years, and there's tons and tons of different kinds of blades for your circular saw. Now you can use all those kinds of blades on this saw as well.
And if you're going to be making simple cuts, this would be perfect for it.
Yeah. For the homeowner that doesn't want to have the big saw out, or likes a cordless tool, or isn't cutting a ton of stuff. Maybe you're making models or hobby work, or you're just not going to be cutting big things. This is a great little saw for that. It's cordless. You could also use it for punchless items on a job site. If you're going to go in and put some shoe down, and you don't want to have to drag a corded saw in with you, or for that matter, you don't want to carry a big saw with you and bang into the walls. So that's a neat little saw for that.
Okay, and so that is cordless. It's got the nice battery option back here, but then they also have the corded.
The corded version, yeah.
Okay, let's throw a couple more terms around here.
Okay.
We got the slide saw, okay, and it's also dual bevel compound slide saws.
Yep.
The slide is the arm in the back right here.
Yep.
The fact that you can move the blade forward, and this is to handle the bigger stock.
Yep. Yeah, it runs on those tubes or rails that have bearings on them, and you've got a couple different versions of it. Now that one, the tubes that it's riding on are that long.
Right.
And we've talked about blade deflection. We'll talk again about deflection here. There are some people that would say that when that saw head is all the way out, and you're all the way out on the end of those tubes, that you can get some deflection with that blade or the whole saw head where it spins back and forth a little bit.
Right, because it's just anchored to the rear, right?
That's right. You
So
can
it's
get
just-
leverage on that.
there's
Yeah.
some torque.
So Makita has solved that issue to some degree, and they've also, I think, gone after a saw that's not as deep. When you look at that one, when the saw head comes all the way back, your saw head, or the end of that tube is sticking quite a ways off the end of that saw. That saw can't be close to the wall. So if you're working in a workshop, you're not going to have that thing right up next to the wall. You're going to be out here, and all that space is wasted. Well, so Makita has changed their rail system into a two-part system, so that one engages and the other one engages. And in doing so, they've also changed part of the problem with deflection.
Yeah,
And-
so each is only traveling a few inches as opposed to a longer distance.
And the reason for having the slide, of course, is to be able to get a larger depth of cut. Without that slide, you're only going to chop. You're only going to come, or miter or whatever. You're only going to come straight down, no matter what.
Right.
And with this, now you're able to cut into, a 1x12 or a 1x10, no problem.
Right, we've got rear controls as well as front adjustments right here. So take us through the compound cuts, because it does have the dual bevel cuts, because it's got the ability to flip it around, and that is a step saver for sure.
That really helps. If you get in a tight situation where you've got your stock on here and it happens to be one of those 14-footers and it's a pain in the butt to move around the house, or in your shop even, you know, on my saw, it's only a single bevel. And now I gotta take that board off and I gotta spin it around sometimes and put it back out. And with a double bevel or dual bevel, of course you can go that way with it, but you can also come back the other way with it. And what that solves is that very problem where you have to spin the stock around. Now you don't have to do that with this.
And when it comes time to really see where you're cutting, it's got a laser on board right here, which is adjustable.
Yeah, exactly. They've got lasers that mount on the sides of blades. This laser mounts on the blade hood here, and it's got an adjustability to it. So if you're changing from one blade to something that's maybe got a narrow curve to it, or you're feeling like, hey, I want that line in just a little bit different position, you can adjust for that.
And boy, that is, it looks like a little tire iron, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Onboard tool, so you can switch your blades out. And therein lies another thing you have to consider when you're buying a saw.
Yeah.
Is how hard or easy it is, how many moving pieces there are that you have to deal with in order to get the blade off.
Yeah, some of them come off pretty easily. You hit a spindle lock and you get that blade wrench on there and you can spin that nut and the blade comes off. Some of them, you gotta disassemble all this mess to some degree and get in there at the nut for the blade.
Okay, and then when it comes to the blade again, this is an interesting setup for the motor because it's not something you see all over the place, and that is it's a 45-degree mount on a direct drive motor, which allows you to see what you're cutting and also cut some taller stock. This one, when you pull it down,
Yep.
it's going to give you that much right here.
Yeah, sometimes your motor will bottom out before your blade does, and that's kind of a pain for people. And in this case, we're direct drive, which means the blade is, or the motor is hooked directly to the blade. You know, you've got belt drive as well, where the motor's up on top, and again, they're going after visibility and trying to get the motor out of the way. And in those cases, you've got a belt that goes through a housing that turns the blade.
Okay, so you got the slide, dual bevel compound, and then there is the glide.
Yeah.
With this glide mechanism, boy, it's really smooth, isn't it?
Yeah, we take the dust collection off here a second. And instead of a slide, they call it a glide.
Right.
And what you've got is a couple different articulating arms. And the big thing here that they went after was that depth of the saw that we were talking about earlier, where those slides go way back and you can't put it tight up against the wall at all. It's kind of a pain. That thing spins around. You get it too close to the wall, you can nick a wall. With this, it ends just like a regular, non-sliding miter box would. And in this case, it slides really, really nice. It's super smooth.
Boy, I like a little more tension in my pull.
You can do that.
Really?
There's a little screw back here that allows you to adjust the tension on this thing so you can get the tension just the way you want it.
Alrighty, I can see it's got the adjustable fences that will slide this way, but also they're taller than most.
Yeah, that's a nice thing. You want to consider the kind of stock you're going to be cutting. If you're going to be cutting, a larger crown, you want a taller fence because that crown's got to lay in there, and you want support on the back of that crown.
All right, and then as far as adjustability of the table, you can pull this one out,
Yep.
push it in, so that'll allow you a little bit more range of motion and support.
Yeah. So your stock gets supported over a longer area. Maybe it doesn't bow as much.
Right, all right, and then sitting on a stand, which I think is an interesting development, because these are big saws these days, and
Yep.
you have to be that big to carry a saw this big, I would imagine.
Yeah. They can start to get heavy. They can start to get bulky. The saw in this case would pop off the stand. It releases, and you could throw the stand in your truck, and you could go out to a job site, take the stand out, put the saw on the stand. And you don't have to find sawhorses or anything like that. So it's good for both of those applications.
All righty, well, I'll tell you what, we've only scratched the surface when it comes to the stands, because that's a whole other category here at toolselect.com, but I think we covered most of the terminology pretty thoroughly.
Yep.
And so now you can have a more full understanding about miter saws in all of their permutations, because that's what we're all about here at toolselect.com. We want to clue people in to the whys and wherefores of every tool, so you guys and girls can make a decision about the tool that's right for you. Hey, what's going on? Barnaby here, along with Mike Johnson, a man who has spent much of his life in the construction industry. So
Yeah.
have all your fingers.
I've got all of them. These two are implants, but that's okay.
Yeah. So anyway, what we're talking about here will be the difference between chop saws and miter saws, because Mike, in my neighborhood, it is all about when somebody wants to borrow a tool. Hey, you got that chop saw?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, no, that's a miter saw.
Yeah.
So set the record
There's
straight.
a difference between
Yeah.
the two. A chop saw, this is a masonry chop saw, but it'll illustrate the point. A chop saw is only going to cut in one direction, just up and down as you're chopping. It doesn't have the ability to spin the blade through the degrees that make it a miter saw. So, in fact, it's kind of hard to find one of these in a woodworking application, because more and more of the woodworking world is all going to miter boxes or miter saws.
Right, and it's so complex when you go into the stores or you go online.